In today's video, I'm going to go over my mouse settings and keybinds for Delta Force, as a few people have asked about them, so here we go. Now, I don't claim to be a pro in Delta Force, this is just what works for me, but maybe it'll also work for you, and it'll give you an idea of how you should bind certain things to make them more accessible, and to reduce how many times you have to remove your fingers from your movement keys to complete certain actions. So starting off with the mouse sense, so as a note, I am using 400 DPI, and I also removed or disabled mouse smoothing and mouse acceleration in the INI file for Delta Force. If you don't know how to do that, I'll link my previous video for this in the top pinned comment, so you can go and do that. In any case, let's go with the mouse. So really, one of the only things I changed here is mouse sensitivity. I put it up to 6 as it felt really slow by default. For the rest of these, I don't really play with vertical sense and horizontal sense, and same thing for ADS, I keep it at 1. For the ADS sensitivity type, I keep it as MDV only, so you could set it per zoom and then per MDV per zoom or set sensitivity per zoom. I just go with the monitor distance coefficient because I want to have the same mouse sense no matter the optic that I'm using. By default, this coefficient is at 1.33, so that's going to keep the same exact mouse sensitivity across all different optics in Delta Force. For sensitivity transition mode, I keep it to ADS transition. I've tried both of the other ones, so toggle at the start of ADS and toggle at the end of ADS, but it just feels really jarring and weird, so that's why I chose to keep it on ADS transition. That is by default, if I remember correctly. Independent offset optic control, this I just left it as is, and for the rest of these settings, pretty much the same. For the ground vehicle sensitivity, pretty much the only thing I changed here was the first person mouse sense because it is really slow by default, so I put it to maxed it out to 10, kept the rest as is. I put this as MDV only as well. I didn't go with set sensitivity per zoom, as I want it to be the same across all of these different zooms that you can have in vehicles. Aircraft sense, actually, this one made a little bit more sense, so I kept the default at 5. I don't fly many aircrafts, I'm not really good at it, so take this with a grain of salt. This is coming from somebody that doesn't fly a whole lot. For the gunner sense, this was perfectly fine how it was by default. Moving over to controls in combat, so obviously the basics, forward, back, left and right, going to be WASD. Some people play on like EDSF, but that's not my jam. For crouch, I completely unbound the hold to crouch and just kept it on toggle. I just prefer it this way, especially when playing operations. I'd rather have it set to toggle so I don't have to actually hold the control key to crouch. You can still crouch slide with D-Wolf perfectly fine, even though you have it set to toggle crouch. As a side note, I think by default crouch might be C or something. It just feels really weird for me to have it on C. I'd rather have it on the pinky finger right below the sprint key. For prone, I think by default it might be X or Z. That is like one of the most inconvenient places to have a keybind, in my opinion. On Z or X, it's right below your movement fingers for WASD, and my pinky at least has a difficult time going to Z without like pushing my ring finger off of A, so I never ever have prone set to Z or X. I always have it set to C, which is a lot easier, and you can do it with your thumb. Jump mantle, that's pretty basic. I don't have mantle only set, and I don't have jump only set. You could set these separately, but I think that jump or mantle being the same key is perfectly fine. All right, so left lean and right lean, these I do a little bit different. In games where it's not as fast paced as Delta Force, I usually keep it on Q and E, but in games that are a lot more fast paced and kind of like Delta Force and Arcade or BattleBit Remastered, I put the leaning on my thumb button. So I have 2 thumb buttons on my mouse. Left lean is the top one, right lean is the bottom one, and I have them both set to hold, not toggle, because you're moving around so much in Delta Force, you're peeking corners really quickly. I would never want to have it set to toggle, because then I would probably just forget to untoggle it, or I would imagine if you start sprinting, you don't lean anymore. At least that's what would make sense. And I don't like to have it on Q and E in fast-paced games like Delta Force, because I don't want to move my fingers off of my movement key, my movement keys, which are WASD, right? So I want to limit how many times I have to remove my fingers from those 4 keys, which is the reasoning behind having left and right peak set to my thumb buttons on my mouse, because my thumb, generally speaking, isn't doing much of anything on the mouse, if that makes sense. Walk, so that's only on operations. I have it set to toggle. For running, I have it set to hold. I don't know for the life of me why people have this set to toggle. Auto run, again, only for operations, and I have it set to the equal, which I think is by default. For combat, fire, obviously you're going to want it as the left mouse button, and aim right, but I have it set to toggle. I know a lot of people like to have it on hold, but I don't know, it just feels really odd for me to have it set to hold. I feel like I put too much pressure on my right mouse button when I have it set to hold for aiming, and then it just throws off my aim. So that's why I have it set to toggle, but this is more like a personal preference thing. Reload obviously is going to be R. For weapon 1, I still have it set to 1, but I also have it set to scroll wheel down. Again, reducing how many times I have to take my fingers off the movement keys. So if I wanted to reach for 1, I'd have to take either my ring finger or the middle finger to get to that key. But if I'm running around and I'm moving at the same time, I don't want to have to take my fingers off of those movement keys. Weapon 2, still on the 2, but also have it set to E. So I know this contradicts what I just said now, but considering how many times I take out my second weapon, having it set to E is not too bad. It takes only my pointer finger to go and reach for that, and I think having that is better than taking my middle finger to go and reach the 2 to get to my secondary weapon. So I think E makes a little bit more sense here, but again, it kind of contradicts what I just said, but this is what feels comfortable for me. This is how I have it set up in a lot of other games. If I want to quickly switch weapons, you probably could have it set like scroll wheel up for weapon 2, for example, and scroll wheel down for weapon 1. I don't like it this way, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Melee weapon, this stays by default on 3. Switch to pistol class gadget 4. Generally speaking, the class gadget in Warfare, you're not using it on a pretty regular basis. It's like ammo, health kits, the AT4 launcher. Generally speaking, I don't need to pull these out in like a very intense situation. That's why I left it on 4. And again, I'm using the pointer finger for this. Previous and next weapon, I don't actually have these bound. Firing mode, I have it set to B. So that's going to be my thumb that's going to go reach for the B. So having my thumb off of the spacebar, not the end of the world. If I were to use one of the 3 fingers that are pressing on the WASD keys, that would not be ideal. Tactical device on T. I'm not turning on the tactical device on and off all the time, especially not in Warfare. In Operations, maybe a little bit more so, but in Warfare, if I have like a laser on there, I'm not turning it on and off. It's just staying on all the time. I don't think it makes a whole lot of a difference to turn it off to prevent people from seeing you or seeing a laser. Switch optics. So as I said, I was using scroll wheel up for something else, and it is specifically to switch optics. In Delta Force, you have variable zoom optics. You can have weapons with multiple optics. If you want to get crazy, you could have like a laser scope with a sight on top and then a canted sight. So that would give you like 4 stances or sights, because the laser gives you an extra stance as well. And this is how I like to use it. It's just like a quick flick of my middle finger or my pointer finger to switch optics, and I think it is just awesome, especially with weapons that you're using in multiple situations like the VSS that you might want to use in close quarter engagements as well as longer range engagements. I have two sights on there, and having it set to the scroll wheel up just makes it super convenient to swap sights really quickly. Inspect weapon, left it as is. As for all these here, so tactical gear and the gadgets, I changed these. Tactical gear would be your pistol, your healing pistol as Stinger, the Crouching Tiger launcher as Viren, the exoskeleton, motorized exoskeleton as D-Wolf. So you get the point. It's the one that like recharges over time. So that's what I have it set as Q. Again, you're not using it that often because there is a cooldown time on it. So taking your ring finger to press it, not too much of a big deal here. For gadget 1, so this is like your smoke screen with Stinger, your boost jump with Viren, your triple blaster with D-Wolf. It's your gadget 1, have it set to V. Really convenient to be able to press it with your thumb. Sometimes you do need to use these in like sticky situations. So gadget 2, this is mostly going to be your throwable. I can use either my thumb or my pointer finger for this. The welding gun, I left it on number 6. You're not going to be using this a whole lot in combat. You might want to start repair torching or welding an enemy tank down, but it's not too much of a big deal to reach with your pointer finger for that one. For the rest, I left it pretty much as is. So open parachute, cut parachute, hold breath. I have it set to hold because I don't like having it set to toggle because I don't know, it's just a personal preference. And then these other 2, I left it as is. So the bipod and the rangefinder, which I don't use a whole lot. For the screen interaction, I left a lot of these actually as is. So interact as is. Other interactions. So taking off the little nano drones that are shot by toxic would be H, and I can actually reach for this with my thumb. So not a whole lot to talk about for these specific key bindings here. And then for vehicles, I did a few changes here, not a whole lot, mostly for the actual gadgets that the vehicles have. By default, they had like weird keys, I think like X or Z or something like that. So I went with vehicle gadget 1 is B, and then vehicle gadget 2 is G. So that's mostly repairs. B is like smokes, for example, or active protection or whatever it's called for the tank. And then for the rest, I just left it as is for the aircrafts. Again, I don't fly a whole lot, so take this with a grain of salt, but that's how it looks for that. That'll be it for today's video. I'm done rambling. I'm sorry if it took a little bit longer. I really want to explain why I had certain keybinds be certain keys on my keyboards, explain the reasoning behind it. Some key bindings might be a little bit more comfortable for you, but do whatever feels best for you. I think one of the big takeaways from this is have everything bound so that you're maximizing the time your fingers spend on WASD, right? But that'll do it for today. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and as always, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.